Can you explain the significance of Llama 2 in the context of other recent advancements in AI and generative models? Maybe kind of fill us in on how the Llama projects in general that Meta was like, you know what, we're going to invest, and obviously, you're not going to divulge on air, but there's rumors that kind of eight-figure sums have been invested in creating Llama 2, and so it's interesting, even from the very beginning. What was it like maybe to get this kind of buy-in from the organization to be doing this open sourcing?
Yeah, uh, I think so. No doubt, large language models are a big deal. They have made some breakthrough in the research. I think also we had like a ChatGPT moment at the end of last year, and most of the people realize the potential of this technology. And so I think we did mainly two things with Llama 2. One, what we call align the model with techniques called RLHF, for instance. I can dig more in depth later if you want on this. But basically, the idea is you have what we call a pre-trained model, which has kind of read all the internet on a next token prediction. So it tries to predict the next token. And this is what we call self-supervision. It's supervision because we have a target, but it's self because texts on the web are vastly accessible, like that. And so just with that, you have a pre-trained language model, which we had with Llama 1, and we did again with Llama 2 and extended it a bit incrementally. And that's where all the knowledge is learned, all the capabilities kind of emerge. But then it's hard to access. And the magic behind ChatGPT is its kind of interface as a chat, which is very natural. And to follow your instructions, to say, oh, but talk like this person, or do these kind of things. Oh, no, make it more like a markdown or a bullet point, or change that, or make it shorter. And it understands your instructions and does it precisely. And this happens at fine tuning. It's kind of refining, educating a pre-trained large language model, which we did also with Llama 2. And that was one of the many innovation because, no one had done that at this scale and open source the model and explaining all the research behind in a research paper, as we did. So before Llama 2, basically, the only large language model aligned that were well, like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google with Barrel, they were closed behind an API. So I would say that's the main innovation in terms of science and in terms of impact for the community, the research community, the business. I think you mentioned, and you're not the only one, your company now uses Llama 2. This is also possible because we also change the license to something commercial, user-friendly for commercial applications.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have 700 million users at my machine learning company yet. So we're still able, this commercial license that allows, as long as you don't have more than 700 million active users, it's okay to use Llama 2. And yeah, so for us, it's brilliant. So previously, we had been using as our base model. So we have a number of different kinds of generative AI capabilities in our platform for our users. And so we take something like Llama 1, which was pre-trained but not fine-tuned. That would have been actually fine for us as a starting point, except for the commercial use limitations. So we never could use the original Llama in production because obviously, it was commercial. There was this commercial use restriction. It was for academic purposes only. And that also meant that some of the initial fine-tuned architectures that came off the back of Llama, like Alpaca out of Stanford, and like Vicuña, that Joey Gonzalez, who was in episode number 707 of this show, developed at Berkeley. And so all of those, that whole family of models, we were like, oh man, we're going to be left out. But then luckily, some groups did come along. So Databricks released Dolly 2.0, for example, and there were some other, and I've done episodes on these open source alternatives that are commercially licensable. So episode 672, I talk about different open source options that are available, where you not only have that pre-training with the self-supervision that you were describing, but also the fine-tuning based on human feedback. That means that the responses are going to be deliberately helpful and kind of more like a conversational, like a chat. Um, and yeah, so we had been using Dolly 2.0 from Databricks as our starting point for the last couple of months. When Llama 2 came out, there was something, the scale, you described this already, the unprecedented scale in terms of the number of tokens, 2 trillion tokens for pre-training, and over 1 million data points for the fine tuning. This kind of scale, it's orders of magnitude more. The Dolly 2.0, for comparison, had 10,000 instructions that were fine tuned on. So you're talking 100 times more. And with these large language models, the scaling laws that we've seen come out, like the chinchilla scaling laws, have showed that you kind of have 3 levers to getting a great model. So the number of parameters, the training data set size, and training time. And it seems like with Llama 2, you and your team have tried to max out all of those things, especially with the 70 billion parameter Llama 2 model. So that's, I guess, something that's also worth, if people haven't listened to my Llama 2 episode already, then you may not be aware that it isn't just one model that was released here. We're talking about a model family. So there's a 7 billion, a 13 billion, and a 70 billion parameter model. And those 2 smaller ones, they'll be able to fit on a single GPU. And so this means that you can run them relatively inexpensively. And so with applications like with my company, where we have a relatively discrete number of generative tasks that we need the model to perform, we can take that 7 billion or that 13 billion and we can fine tune it to our tasks. And so for listeners who aren't aware, you can do this yourself at home using a parameter efficient fine tuning technique like LoRA, low rank adaptation, which I talk about in episode number 674. So you can take the model like Llama 2, and the 7 billion, 13 billion, you can typically very inexpensively, for tens of dollars or hundreds of dollars, you can fine tune that to your own specific tasks. And for us, that's perfect. It means we now have this amazing large language model that it's as good as GPT-4 or better in our own tests when we start with Llama 2 and we fine tune with our own data at this narrow range of tasks that we have. And then if you're a listener out there and you're like, well, I want the absolute state of the art, then you can use Llama 2. And at least in terms of open source, this is going to be this state of the art. So yeah, I've just talked a lot, but the point is that, yeah, Thomas, what you've done and this, what this means for us as a community to have access to something like Llama 2, it's a game changer. It was obvious that it was a game changer within minutes of starting to read the Llama 2 materials online, and my data science team at my company immediately started retraining our models with Llama 2.
It's always good to hear. Thanks. Maybe worth mentioning what we released also is, so it was extending context length from 2 to 4,000,
Yep.
etc. It's on text only for now, but I think that's also the magic of open sourcing. We don't want to push for access for where the community will deal with that easily. And we know that extending the context length at fine-tuning is possible. We know that connecting multimodal inputs is straightforward. And what was magic is after the release, within a week, people have done that efficiently. And so that's also one of the strengths, in my opinion, of open sourcing these kind of models. And we'll see much more innovation with shorter cycles of innovation thanks to that. So that was one of the philosophy also. We went, as you said, all in on the scale of the things that we can do at Meta to make it as good as we can so that everyone could use it in the end to adapt it for their use cases.